In this video, I want to discuss why I am seriously worried about the future of the UK over the next year or so. And I am not alone in this thinking. So in this video, I want to focus on the one thing that I think is key to the future of the UK. And if this goes wrong, well, I dread to think what is going to happen. But before I recorded this video, I actually made a list of 10 other things I was going to do, 10 reasons why I was worried about the future of the UK. But I decided this one thing was more important than all of them put together. So to give an example, I was going to talk about inflation, the energy crisis, the trade deficit, the aging population, Brexit, unaffordable housing, failing public services, productivity, the breakup of the UK potentially, and of course, inept leadership. So there's some quite major things there. But I decided the one thing that we're going to focus on in this video is more important than all of those. So I'm sure you guys are aware that on Friday there was a so-called mini budget where the new government outlined their plans for their spending for the next couple of years. And to be fair, the budget was very generous in the sense they cut a lot of taxes. Now, there's a lot of debate about how fair those cuts are, which seems to be the case that a lot more of the wealthy people are going to benefit versus the poorer people. And I think that is pretty accurate. But either way, there are huge tax cuts which are going to cost the government and basically us billions of pounds in the future. And before this budget was even announced, the IFS, which is the Institute for Fiscal Studies, made quite a worrying statement. They said that tax cuts due to be announced on Friday are likely to push UK borrowing and debt to unsustainable levels. And that is what I am really worried about. If debt levels are unsustainable, if people won't lend to the UK because they don't trust that we're not going to default, things are going to get very bleak in the UK very, very quickly. So after the mini budget took place, there was this article in the Financial Times covering the fallout from the mini budget. And we can see here the pound hits a 37-year low against the dollar on huge UK tax cut gamble. Now I'm 37 years old and I have never seen the dollar this low, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. And if we scroll down a bit further, it says here UK government bonds sold off sharply and the pound hit a new 37-year low against the dollar as investors worried that the Chancellor's tax cuts and energy subsidies would place Britain on an unstable fiscal trajectory. And I think it's difficult to argue with that conclusion. So the IFS are worried about it, the markets are worried about it, and subsequently I'm worried about it, and potentially you guys are also worried about it as well. But the key thing actually I wanted to focus on from that paragraph is this bit here. UK government bonds sold off sharply. So why is this so important? Well, government bonds, just to explain what they are, they're also called gilts in the UK. That is how the government raises money. That's how it services the public, and that's how it services existing debt as well. So how it works is when the government wants to raise money, they sell gilts to people or to investment, to institutions, insurance companies, places like that. And how it works is, say for example, someone decided to buy £1,000 of gilts. Now generally people are going to be buying hundreds of thousands or £1 million worth of gilts, but let's just say £1,000 worth of gilts. They would need to choose for what period they wanted to gilt for. So you can see here we have some are a 3 or a 6 month or a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, all the way up to a 30-year gilt. And how it works is the government will pay a yield, which is basically the interest rate on that money. So if you lent the government, say £1,000, and they gave you a yield of 2%, then every single year they would pay you £20, as that's 2% of that £1,000. And then at the end of the gilt, so say you took a 10-year one, so you'd have those 2% interest payments every year for 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, they'd repay that £1,000 in full to you. So that's how the government raises money, by selling these gilts. Now, the reason I am worried is that these are starting to get very expensive for the government. So if we go back to that Financial Times article and scroll down a bit further, this is the yield rate for 10-year gilts. And you can see it's been coming down since 2011. And for the past few years, it's been very, very cheap for the government to borrow. But at the moment, it is approaching 4%. So the government, for effect, if you lent them £1,000, would be paying you £40 every single year. And then at the end of the gilt, of course, would repay you in full as well. And the more expensive it is for the government to borrow, it costs them more to actually provide services, and it costs them more to service existing debt. And this kind of gets caught in a vicious circle where the debt just keeps getting more and more expensive. As the more debt that the government accumulates, the less confidence the markets will have that the government is able to service that debt. So the government has to offer it at an even higher rate to appeal to investors to actually give them the money. Now, if we look back at the history of the yield rate for 10-year gilts, there's just one example, of course, you can get it for other periods of time. You can see around about the time of the financial crisis, it was around that 4 to 5% level, and we've been in decline ever since. And during this period where the cost of debt has basically becoming cheaper and cheaper, what we've also seen is government debt has been going up and up and up. So since the financial crisis around 2008, it's been going up fairly sharply. Now, what we've never had is the government debt increasing sharply whilst the yield rate goes up as well. So this is the concerning bit here. This tick up at the end. All of a sudden, the government's gone from being able to borrow at less than 1% last year. Now they're going to have to borrow at around 4%. And that is extremely worrying when you've got over £2 trillion in debt to service, plus extra hundreds of billions in spending from the new energy price cap and also the mini budget that was announced on Friday. And I'm not the only ones concerned. If we go to the markets here, so there's basically a market for selling 10-year gilts. It's not just a case of buying it from the government. They can be resold effectively on the second-hand market. You might want to think about it like that. And you can see the value of these gilts has been plummeting, absolutely plummeting for the past couple of years, with massive drops in the past 2 months, which is a reflection of investor sentiment. No one wants to be holding UK gilts at the moment. So the government has to entice people to buy gilts. They keep putting the interest rate up, which in turn creates more and more debts. And on top of that, of course, GBP just continues to get weaker and weaker and weaker. We're down to $1.08 now against the USD, which is absolutely insanely low. And that is why I'm worried about the future of the UK. That is why the IFS is worried about the ability of the UK government to service its debt. That is why the markets are spooked as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how the next few months and the next year or so play out with this. But I am very concerned. Let me know if you're concerned in the comments below. If you found this video useful, make sure you hit the like button. If you want to see more from me, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see why I've sold my house as I believe the UK housing market is going to crash, I'm going to pop up a video to that now. Give that a watch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.